All right, good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Hello.
Hi, Carrie.
Thanks. For those of you that don't know, my name is Carrie Soden. I am the Director of Archaeology and Research here at the National Museum of the Great Lakes. As always, thank you to all of you for signing up, and please don't forget you can always give money at nmgl.org/donate. But before we get started tonight, I want to introduce our executive director, or as I should say, our new executive director, Kate Finesky, who's going to talk a little bit about our future and show a little video, and then we will get started with Kim right after that.
For those of you that are online, hi, you can see my face right now. I'm Kate Finesky, the Executive Director of the National Museum of the Great Lakes. We are very excited. This space that you all are in right now, this is our only extra space. This is where we have our lecture series. This is where we have our temporary exhibits. This is where we have our board meetings. This is where when we have school field trips in, our students eat the lunch in here. This is where our staff is overflowed in. This is where everything happens, and we are about to grow by 5,000 square feet. So I can talk through this again as well. We are adding on 5,000 square feet to the museum exhibit space. Here's the pilot house, the St. Mary's Challenger that I told you about, that will be connected to the interior of the museum exhibit space. From the outside, it's going to be a seamless connection to the museum. There'll be an additional entranceway so that people can access our dedicated space for Great Lakes community education after hours and at any time. Then once they are there and done learning, they can either open up or close and connect directly to our dedicated space for temporary and traveling exhibits so that we can house Smithsonian quality temporary exhibits. New permanent exhibit space telling the Every Ship Tells a Story, and we'll take you through a lot more of our artifact collection. And then we will have a year-round access to a pilot house experience. We're very excited about this. I can talk about it for hours, even when the video isn't playing. If you do have an interest in learning more about this or missed any of the video, would like to hear a little bit more, a better commentary, which I can tell you is Carrie over there on the video, please visit nmgl.org/thesecondwave, and it'll take you to a page to tell you more about it.
Kate, thank you for sharing with that. Tonight is the first of our spring lecture series for 2024. The spring lecture series is sponsored by the Impact Employment Solutions. So tonight we delve into something just a little bit different, Great Lakes wildlife, and specifically birds that can be seen in the Great Lakes. Now, I will tell you this, I did not know this until we started moving the museum here, but did you know that Western Lake Erie and Toledo is home to the biggest week in American birding? Well, okay, see, everybody knows. I did not. That was something new to me. And we're also the warbler capital of the world. So, all right, now I see that I do history, so I'm learning something new tonight too. And so we're going to talk about migratory birds, migratory bird patterns, and these are things that have been going on as we talk about this is about history. It is, but it's also, these are migratory birds that have been going on for thousands of years. So how do we observe what happened thousands of years ago that we can see still today? Here to tell us about it is Kim Kaufman. She is the executive director of the Black Swamp Bird Observatory in Northwest Ohio, whose mission is to inspire the appreciation, enjoyment, and conservation of birds and their habitats through research, education, and outreach.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you about birds, but I have to issue a word of caution. There's this term, let me get in the camera here, for the migratory restlessness of birds, and it's called the Zugenruha. And I'm sure if you're German, I'm clobbering that word. But this time of year, my staff and I start to feel the Zugenruha ourselves. We love this time of year. We're so excited about all the birds and birders that are coming this way. So if I start to really get revved up, just say, Kimberly, you're gonna have to take it down a couple notches. So, because this, in addition to being able to talk to you about birds, I love this place. And I first met Kate, I think this was last summer. And embarrassingly, it was my first trip to the museum, and I am so smitten with this institution. I absolutely love it. We've traveled all over the world, and I've seen so many different museums. This is done so well on every level, from the displays. I played on all the kids' displays to the video. Typically, you sit down and watch the video and you think, oh, that was nice. I was so sad when it was over. The little video you can watch. If you haven't done that, you really must watch the video. It's superbly done. So it's a real honor for me to be here in this place talking about birds and birding in Northwest Ohio. So before we start talking about that, I just want to begin a little overview of Black Swamp Bird Observatory and what this organization is. We were founded in 1992. We're a nonprofit that's funded by members, donors, and grants. And we are located about halfway between the cities of Oregon and Port Clinton, right up on the lakeshore inside the entrance to McGee Marsh Wildlife Area. We're sort of nestled between the state wildlife area at McGee Marsh and the federal facility at Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. And it's a great position for a nonprofit to be because we work collaboratively with both of those agencies on research, education, and outreach. So there's a great spirit of teamwork there. And in terms of bricks and mortar, it's a pretty modest organization. There's not a lot of overhead. So every dollar that the public can trust us with goes into programming. But there are exciting things happening at Black Swamp, just like there are here. We are doing a complete renovation of the interior of that little office, new spaces for my staff. They'll all have their own office. I'm so excited for them. And we are in the process of building a 42 by 60 education center. The exterior is built. We're still working on the interior, but this will allow us to expand our programming in a major way, offering programs year round. We can seat about 200 people in that building. And out the back, out the north side, will be a spectacular window on wildlife. I think arguably the best one in the region, with a stream and feeders that will allow our visitors to sit and enjoy the birds from the comfort of the building. And along that will be an expansive native plant garden with plants that you can learn how to plant at home to start your own native plant garden. So we are very excited about the expansion of our facility. So the Bird Observatory is perhaps most well known for the biggest week, but we've been conducting migratory bird research in this region for more than 30 years. And our primary banding station, our research station, believe it or not, is located behind the Davis-Besse nuclear power station. There's a great partnership between that facility and our organization. It's a kind of a weird marriage between a nonprofit and nuclear power plant, but behind that power plant, it's not open to the public, so few people know about it, is a vast area of habitat that's one of the most important areas for migratory birds on the entire continent. And we have the great privilege and honor of working in that marsh spring and fall, 7 days a week. We have staff scientists that work side by side with volunteers, the general public, on this important project. The birds are captured, they're brought back to this little building, weighed, measured, many different information is collected. And the way we do that is using a tool called mist nets. These are roughly 12 feet high, 40 feet long. They're sort of like the combination between a hair net and a volleyball net. So these are put up in the marsh. The birds can't see them. They fly into them. And our volunteers and staff are trained to carefully extract the birds uninjured, take them back to the building. They're weighed, measured. A little silver band gets put on their leg that identifies them as an individual. And our banders are so good that typically by the time they get the bird in the hand in the building, 30 seconds later, that bird is back out in the wild on its way. The information that we gather while we have those birds in the hand is so valuable and so important to habitat conservation across the region. The Bird Observatory has a strong commitment to youth education. We want to keep kids connected with birds and nature. These programs bring thousands of students right out into the marsh at Black Swamp to work side by side with our scientists. They're dynamic, curriculum-based, and we can literally watch the joy and awakening on the faces of these kids when they get to hold a migratory bird for the first time. And at the end, the kids are allowed to release the birds back out into the wild. We're very proud of these programs. We offer these to schools at absolutely no charge, and we do that. We fund those through memberships in our organization. But we are most well known for hosting the biggest week in American birding, this humbly named little event. It's legit to call it the biggest week because it's a week that lasts 10 days. So it's a 10-day event in early spring, timed to coincide with the peak of songbird migration through the region. We headquartered the event at the beautiful Maumee Bay Lodge and Conference Center. If you haven't been to the Maumee Bay Lodge, you should go out there for a visit. It's the perfect place to host the headquarters for this event. And you can learn more at thebiggestweekinamericanbirding.com. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about the event, but I have to tell you some of the great things we have planned for this year. First, there are so many different workshops available, from photo workshops to bird identification, field trips going all over Northwest Ohio, from oak openings all the way almost to Huron. There are activities for every skill level. If you've never gone birding before, or you're a seasoned expert like Bob Pettit in the audience, shout out to you, Bob. There is an event or an activity at this festival for you. Every night at the lodge, we have evening socials with free refreshments. There's a birders marketplace. If you like to shop, you want to head out there for some unique gifts and lots of giveaways. And this year, we always have stellar keynotes, but this year, our lineup of keynotes is the best we've ever had. We have Christian Cooper, Jennifer Ackerman, who is a New York Times bestselling author, Jerry Barrier, who is a blind birder from Tennessee, who will inspire us all with his joy of birding from a different perspective, Kevin Carlson, Tama Watts, and Peter Kasner. Peter is such an interesting person. He recently reached an incredible milestone of having seen 10,000 of the world's 11,000 bird species. He's seen more birds in the world than any other human being, and he's coming to the biggest week to share that incredible adventure with us. We are very excited and honored to host the launch of Ken Kaufman's new book, The Birds That Audubon Missed. This is published by Simon & Schuster. This wasn't strategy. Ken's my husband, full disclosure. Wasn't strategy, just the date shook out that the official publication date was May 7th, right smack in the middle of biggest week. So we get to host the launch of this incredible book. We're very excited about that. And we are thrilled to bring Amy Tan, yes, that Amy Tan, as our featured banquet speaker at the biggest week in American birding this year. It turns out that Amy Tan, author of the Joy Luck Club and many other best-selling titles, Amy is a passionate bird watcher. She enjoys watching birds in her backyard, and she's written a new wonderful book, The Backyard Bird Chronicles. She's also, if you didn't know this about her, an incredibly talented artist. And the book is full of her original illustrations of the birds that she's drawn in her backyard. So we are very excited to have her there to give a keynote and do a book signing. And something very unique for the biggest week is the Bowerbird Collective performance of A Season on the Wind. This is a book also by Ken Kaufman. A Season on the Wind is a book about spring migration in Northwest Ohio. This book, not only has it educated a lot of people about birds and bird migration, it's also helped to promote Northwest Ohio as a great place to visit. The Bowerbird Collective is a small group of award-winning musicians who will do a cinematic concert based on Ken's book. And we are pleased to host the world premiere of this performance at the biggest week in American birding at Maumee Bay. But we're also very honored to partner with the Toledo Museum of Art, who we've partnered with on many bird-related exhibits. You'll have a second opportunity to see this performance in the Glass Pavilion, the lovely venue there, on Monday, May 13th. So I hope that you'll be able to attend either one or both of those performances. And we couldn't do all this without a host of generous sponsors. These are just our top sponsors. I hope when you visit the Biggest Week in American Birding website, you'll take a look at all of the sponsors who help make this possible. So the Biggest Week in American Birding really truly transforms Northwest Ohio in spring. And there's no better example of that than this stretch of boardwalk. This is the boardwalk at McGee Marsh Wildlife Area. How many of you have been on this boardwalk? A lot of people in the room have been on the boardwalk. We have really made this into a world famous stretch of lumber. This boardwalk has become one of the most iconic birding destinations during spring in the world. And it's about a mile-long stretch of boardwalk that transects exactly the kind of habitat that migratory birds need as they're making their journeys north. This is what it looks like on any given day in June, July, or August. This is what it looks like on any given day in early May. Now, if you aren't into crowds, I totally understand that. But let's talk about who this crowd is. These are the happiest people from all over the world coming together to celebrate their common love of birds. Some people call this a crowd, they call it a traffic jam. I call these bird snuggles, where everyone's coming together to share their love of birding. And if you've ever made your way through one of these crowds, what you'll hear are all different languages being spoken, and it's the common language of the love of birds that's shared there. This happens when a really good bird, like a golden wing warbler, shows up along the boardwalk, and everyone gets pulled into the bird snuggle, and everyone gets to see it because everyone is sharing the location of the bird. And once the bird moves on, typically these crowds kind of thin out and you can make your way right through there. So it's not always like this on the McGee Marsh boardwalk. So we're going to talk about why all these birds are here. To understand why the birders are here, we have to talk about the birds first. And the first thing is migration, obviously. Many of these birds are spending the winter in Central and South America, and they're making their way north to their breeding grounds. Now, if humans could fly, we could migrate the way that swans and geese and cranes migrate, because the adults show the young the way and they migrate during the day using visual landmarks. It gets a lot harder to wrap your head around when you talk about the migration of songbirds, because these little birds that weigh less than an ounce hatch out with the route, the instinct to know where and when to go, hardwired in their DNA. They don't migrate together. The adults don't show them the way, but a little bird that weighs less than an ounce will make an epic journey all on its own, just on instinct. Isn't that the most miraculous thing? And these birds migrate at night. There are a lot of theories, studies have been done. Primarily, people think it's because there are fewer predators at night, the kinds of things that want to eat birds. The temperatures are cooler, but we do know that these birds navigate using celestial navigation. They have the star patterns hardwired, and some of these birds can read the Earth's magnetic field. How incredible is that? It's miraculous. And so every night during spring and fall migration, this incredible feathered parade is passing overhead, and so many people have no idea that this incredible thing is happening right over Northwest Ohio. But you know, and now you can go out and tell others and get them out there and take them birding. So migration. Migration is the first reason there are so many birds here. The second reason is Lake Erie. If you're a small bird and you don't swim and you don't even float, you're reluctant to cross a large body of water unless you're at your energetic best, because you don't want to end up in the water. So as they're coming along at night, they see the edge of Lake Erie, they see this daunting barrier, and they want to drop down into the habitat along the lakeshore to rest and refuel, to power up for that journey across the lake. And primarily what they're powering up on is insects. These are mostly insectivores. And this is one of the things I love so much, is that what migratory birds need, the lakeshore habitats provide in abundance in terms of insects. So these little little insects are called midges. And it's usually a dirty word to say mayflies anywhere along the lakeshore. But they're very similar to mayflies, but they're smaller. They don't bite. They don't have working mouth parts. They emerge from the water and they're covering a lot of the vegetation just at the time when migratory birds are passing through, and they provide a bonanza of food that provides the fuel that powers those birds across the lake. The next reason is this funneling effect. And this is a very generalized overview of the routes that migratory birds take in spring. So first you have the westerly group. These are the birds that don't want to cross the Gulf of Mexico. So they'll skirt out around the Gulf, come up along the Gulf Coast in Texas and up through the Great Plains. The second group we call the trans-Gulf migrants. These are birds that are going to come up generally to the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula and then power all the way across the Gulf of Mexico. It's approximately an 18-hour flight that these little birds are making. They'll hit the Gulf Coast exhausted, refuel, and then make little hops right up through the Great Plains. The third route is the easterly route. This will bring them up through Cuba, the Antilles, up along Florida and the eastern seaboard. But look what happens right over Northwest Ohio. All three of those migratory routes converge. And what that means is we get big numbers of so many different kinds of birds that it creates this spectacular birding experience. And you overlap that with the next level of the funneling effect. And that's that those habitats that migratory birds need have mostly disappeared. If you look at this map, you can see basically all agricultural lands, but see those little green areas right along the lakeshore? Those are last areas of remaining habitat for migratory birds, and we owe those habitats to the historic duck clubs. The duck hunters had the conservation ethic and foresight to hold on to those places to resist development. And eventually those places were passed over into the state and federal wildlife agencies, which is a really cool thing because if you're a migratory bird, it makes it tough because you only have these last remaining places to forage. But if you're a birder, you can now have access to these concentrations of birds. So that funneling effect makes it tough for birds, but great for birders. So now, why are birders here? And that might seem like an obvious answer. Of course, they're here for birds. More than 300 species of birds have been documented on the lakeshore, but these are the stars of the show. We keep talking about warblers. These are warblers, and this is just a small sampling of the more than 32 species that can be found on the lakeshore in spring migration if you work really hard and call in sick and get to the lakeshore every day that you can during migration. These are beautiful, small, colorful birds that are just so active and so intensely alive. They sing beautiful songs, and people love warblers. But everywhere else in the warbler's life cycle, these are birds that are at the treetop height, way up high, dispersed out over large areas. But as they come through here, they're concentrated and they're so intent on feeding that they are oblivious to people. You can see warblers here at their vibrant best better than almost anywhere else in the world during spring migration. So that is part of what brings people here. But the birds have been coming here, passing through for millennia. These wildlife areas have been here for decades. Why now are all these birders coming to Northwest Ohio? It's because we invited them. The Bird Observatory, prior to starting the biggest week, put together a conservation business plan that involved marketing the area to birders. And we'll talk a little bit more about the other elements of that plan. But because we're birders, because we travel the world in pursuit of birders, we know what a birder is looking for, what information they need, and that they want in a birding destination. First, you have to have a tagline, right? So we thought if this can be the walleye capital of the world, it can be the warbler capital of the world. And we laid claim to that title. And I'll tell you that traveling around the world, we'll say, well, we're from Northwest Ohio near Toledo, and people will say, oh, the warbler capital of the world. So it's really caught on, people really latched on to this tagline. But to that, we built a whole suite of important information about some of the significant things that make the experience here so extraordinary. So the fact that you can see warblers well, That's something that we market all over the world. The peak of songbird migration typically happens before the full leaf out, although that's changing a bit as the climate warms. Typically, the birds are coming through at a time when the leaves are just budding out, so you can see them really well. And this, if you're a birder, if you've spent time outside doing any kind of recreation, this is significant. The peak of migration happens before the biting insects come out. So you don't have to deal with flies or mosquitoes. That's really important. And this is one of my favorite things. By the time the birds get to our latitude, it's close enough to the breeding season that the males are singing. You don't get that on the Gulf Coast during migration. The birds, when they arrive here, are at their vibrant best. They've made short little hops, fairly rested when they get here. And in addition to these colorful, intensely alive little birds, you have this symphony of nature sound that just surrounds you when you're out there. And these are all the things that we wove into all of our marketing messages. To that, we built a whole suite of birder services. Believe it or not, none of these things existed in Northwest Ohio, so we built them ourselves. We built birding area maps. On the back was interpretation of what birds you could see in any given place at these wildlife areas. We made free Wi-Fi hotspots. We listed migration updates and predictions through multiple sites. We offered guided services. We'd have volunteers out there helping people find birds. We posted bird sighting on Facebook, and this made a lot more sense when it was Twitter and not X, because it's Twitter and their tweets. Elon's got to change that back. I need to write him a letter and say, you're really messing up my presentation. But we were the first birding effort to use Twitter to post bird sightings. And to that, we added travel information because birders want a one-stop shop. Like, here's all the birding information. Here are great hotels, lodging, and dining opportunities in the region. Sorry, Ken. I had Ken print out my slides before I put this in. How great that we could have a birding legend act as our spokesperson. My husband, Ken, is a world-renowned birder. It's highly respected. When Ken puts birding information out there, people listen. And so when Ken moved here in the early 2000s, and he was writing at that point for every birding magazine in the country, when Ken started writing about birding in Northwest Ohio, it was almost like the global birding community turned and said, what? Northwest Ohio? Who's going birding there? But if Ken was birding here, they listened. So we had a great spokesperson in Ken. Sorry, Ken. And I think it's safe to say that our marketing efforts have been very effective because now more than 90,000 people travel to Northwest Ohio every spring just to look at our birds. To date, we've had festival registrants from every state, more than 50 countries, and every continent. So you have to do me a favor. If you have contacts with people who live on Antarctica and you could get them to register for our festival, I'd be so grateful to you. So I can say every continent and not just 6. So what do all these birders mean for the local economy? This question was so important to us as we were building our conservation business plan, because we anticipated that it would be a pretty major economic impact. And we knew that that data would open the door to talk to lawmakers and elected officials. So into the festival, we built a post-event economic impact and travel survey that gathered important travel information that we share with the convention and visitors bureaus and chambers of commerce, but also economic impact data. And in 2016, we sent out a survey and all of us were shocked at the results. Now this is, I'm sorry, it was 2018. This is woefully outdated information because at that point we had about 70,000 birders visiting here. And to that question, how much did you spend on gas, food, shopping, and lodging while you were here birding? The answer was $40 million every year. And we used a very conservative formula to arrive at this figure. The great thing about small nonprofits is that they make everything work. So we have statistical analysis software to crunch the bird data, but it's not exclusive to crunching bird data. So we were able to do our own in-house analysis of this question, extrapolating by the number of cars that crossed a traffic counter into McGee Marsh Wildlife Area. So independent numbers. And this sort of jived with a study that Bowling Green State University, Dr. Chi did a few years before this. That was at the beginning of the festival. And at that point, it was $23 million. So we feel very comfortable in stating these figures. It's important to note that this happens during what the tourism industry considers the shoulder season or the slow time for tourism. Our little organization has extended the local tourism season by a full month. Small businesses in particular are impacted. They're opening earlier. They're putting people back to work. And the taxes that this brings into the state are huge. So we are so proud of what this festival means for the economy of Northwest Ohio. And it does give us a powerful voice to speak on behalf of bird conservation. We collect those economic impact numbers, and when the festival is over, we roll up our sleeves and we knock on the door of elected officials, of community leaders, to impress upon them the value, the economic value of conserving and restoring habitat as often as we can. It allows our conservation committee to address the greatest threats to birds. And a concept that we've really pioneered is protecting the air column. When you talk about habitat conservation, we all talk about protecting wetlands, grasslands, forests, and waterways, and Lake Erie, but we never think about the air column as habitat. But it makes sense. Birds and bats spend a huge portion of their life on the wing in the air. And in places like this, where so many birds concentrate, it's not the right place for things like wind turbines. I think we all know that we need renewable energy, but choosing the right renewable energy for our area is the solution. Every roof of hospitals, of schools, every parking garage should be featuring a solar array. That's the right, safe, renewable energy for a place that's globally important to birds. If we get it wrong here, we could impact the global population of some species of birds because they're all here concentrated in Northwest Ohio. The asset that it brings comes with a big responsibility. The other threat that we're working to address is many studies have shown that the number one cause of songbird mortality is outdoor cats, outdoor roaming cats. And this is a very controversial topic, but if you have conservation at the core of your mission, you can't shy away from it. We also believe that it's better for cats. We just think cats should be treated the same as dogs. We should never be allowing cats to roam for the safety of the cats as well as native birds and small mammals, that populations that they're decimating. Again, this is the courage of our board and staff to take on this issue because people are passionate about cats. I'm passionate about cats. We have indoor cats of our own, and I would never dream of letting them go outside on their own. To address this, we started in the village where Black Swamp Bird Observatory is based in Oak Harbor. And for more than 2 years, we worked with elected officials, with their village council, and with a veterinarian in town to come up with a law that essentially bans outdoor feeding stations and treats cats in a responsible way. We hope to use this model to impress other cities and towns to stop spaying and neutering cats and dumping them out into colonies. It's just not the right answer for cats, for the people that live near these colonies, and it's definitely not right for migratory birds and native mammals. The next threat that we took on is the threat of building collisions. This is another huge cause of mortality. We talked about the fact that migratory birds are moving at night, and tall lighted buildings disorient birds. They either die by crashing into the buildings directly, or they become disoriented and circle the buildings until they fall to the ground exhausted. So the biggest city near us was Toledo. So we came to the elected officials, to city council, to the mayor's office, to the Lucas County commissioners, and had immediate support from all of those entities to introduce a lights out program in the city of Toledo. And I cannot tell you how proud I am of this initiative. It's simple. All buildings have to do is during spring and fall migration, for a window of time at night, is turn off the upper level lights and any decorative lights that are pointing up into the air. Those are the most problematic lights. Many, not all, but many of the tall buildings in the city of Toledo are participating in this program. If you work in a building, if you see one that isn't, be an advocate, go out and encourage them to get a hold of Black Swamp, and we would love to talk to them. We're actively reaching out to try to get more buildings enrolled, but building collisions are a big, big problem, and Toledo is already doing a great job of addressing this issue. City Council unanimously passed a resolution that the city would participate and encouraged all other buildings. You can find that if you Google search building collisions Toledo, the resolution, you can find the language of it. It's a really great program. And I'm going to finish out this presentation. I'm only going to scratch the surface. I want to talk about the birds this time of year. And what is it about birds that's so captivating for people? And we would have to be here for days and days for me to even cover this. But these are some of the things that over my love of birds have really touched my life. The first is, I think, is that birding itself. There's a comfort in the predictableness of birding. We know that this time of year, those huge flocks of red-winged blackbirds are going to return to the marsh on a somewhat predictable timetable. There's a rhythm to it that comforts me to know the red-winged blackbirds will come back and they'll populate those marshes with those beautiful red shoulders and that conqueree sound that they do. And on a funnier note, we know that blue jays have peanut radar. And if we haven't seen any blue jays in our yard for weeks, within a couple of hours of putting peanuts out, the blue jays are back. They just know they got the peanuts out and we're coming back. So birding is predictable. But what's really fun is that birding is an unpredictable treasure hunt. And the more you get out to look for birds, the more likely it is that you're going to encounter something that's way out of range, some rare bird. And this is a perfect example. Last fall, flamingos got blown off course and started showing up in the Midwest. And down near Cincinnati at the Caesar Creek Wildlife Area, these flamingos showed up. And people were just knocked out. And from all over the state and other states traveled down to Caesar Creek to look at these incredible birds. They weren't there for very long, but the more you get out, there's that fun element of not knowing what you'll see out there. I think birds are among the most beautiful and colorful beings on the entire planet. The range of, and this is the invisible resplendent quetzal, by the way. There on the, I think it's not on my screen. There used to be a resplendent quetzal. You'll have to Google search it and trust me that it's very colorful and beautiful. It didn't show up on the screen. But the color of plumages of birds is just endlessly dazzling. And I have to give a shout out to the bird at the top, this little Jamaican toady. This is a tiny, tiny little bird. Toadies are only found on a few of the Caribbean islands, nowhere else in the world. And two of the people that Ken and I traveled with, this was just a few weeks ago. I just took this picture. They're tiny little birds. My picture is a little washed out, but they're just so vividly green. And Margie Trumbull and Meredith Prime, what a joy it was to get to share my first toady anywhere in the world with such dear friends and wonderful travelers. So I think it's the colors and the beauty of birds. Oh, there's the quetzal. The quetzal makes the scene. I told you it was pretty. It just flew in. Exactly. I've always thought of opening up a pretzel shop and calling it the resplendent pretzel shop. Of course, birds use color for really practical reasons. Attracting a mate. This is a ruby-throated hummingbird flaring out that red, they call it a gorget, the red throat patch. They can flare that out to look either really sexy if there is a female nearby or menacing if there's a male. And we have a red-winged blackbird here that's using those red epaulets to establish territorial boundaries. So birds use color for practical reasons, like camouflage. Can you see the snowy owl on the screen? The snowy owl that here on a light pole looks so vividly white, but on the tundra where there's snow, look at that camouflage. What a magnificent bird that is. But for the humans, the human admirers of these birds, the color of that plumage is just something that's just dazzles us every time. And here's this little fiery throated hummingbird to prove the point. I think the songs of birds are just endlessly delightful. I was going to try to put some sound into the PowerPoint presentation, but I was afraid that it wouldn't work. And I think that was a good choice, all things considered. But the songs of birds can be very simple, just a note or two, or incredibly complex, where some birds have a larynx where they can harmonize with themselves, like the veery. If you've never heard a veery sing, please Google search it when you get home, the song of a veery, and listen to this ethereal song that they sing. So the songs of birds, I think, are really captivating. I want you guys all to do an exercise for me. For those of you that are seasoned birders, I'm sure that you are very well aware of birdsong. But if you've never thought about it, later in the spring, when the songbirds are back, I want you to take 30 seconds to stand in a metro park in your backyard, somewhere where it's relatively quiet. And I want you to listen for the bird song around you. I've done this with classes of brand new birders, and the look on their face when they realize that all of this beautiful music has been around them their whole life and they never heard it. Because once you tune your ears into the sounds of nature, you won't miss out on the purest and most beautiful music in the world. I love the way birds build nests. This is a Baltimore Oriole, and if you've never seen a Baltimore Oriole nest, they're related to red-winged blackbirds. They have very strong toes. They cling to the end of the branch and they use their bill to actually weave this pouch of silken plant down. It's just like this little miraculous thing. And it's designed to stretch and grow as the young grow inside that pouch. They put it out at the very small, thin tip of a branch to keep predators away. So there's some strategy behind it too. And Ohio is home to the great nest of the bald eagle. This was in Vermilion, Ohio. Bald eagles will add to their nest year after year if the tree supports it, and they can get quite massive. This nest was there until 1925. It was 12 feet high, 8 feet wide, and weighed almost 2 tons. And this is the best time to get out and look for bald eagle nests because driving along State Route 2 between Toledo and Port Clinton, you'd have to work hard not to see a bald eagle these days. And the nests are so visible right now. They're actively nesting. So you're likely to see adults around the nest too. But we'll go from the massive to the miniature. And this is the tiny, beautiful nest of a ruby-throated hummingbird. And I'm sure everybody typically knows what a hummingbird is, but fewer people know the way a hummingbird constructs its nest. And this is just like pure magic to me. All the work is done by the female. All the male does is have as many girlfriends as he can. And then the female does all the work of building the nest and raising the young. And what she does first is to buzz around and collect little strands of spider web. She'll collect strands of spider web after she's picked out her site, and she'll put down a little pad of sticky spider web. To that, she'll add little puffs of plant down and continue to sit in the middle and form this little cup around her as it builds and builds until she gets it to the point that she wants. And then she carefully flies around and selects little bits of lichen and festoons the outside of that nest with lichen. Not to make it more beautiful, although it certainly does that. It's to hide it from predators. And if you've ever looked for a ruby-throated hummingbird nest, you know that it's very effective camouflage because they can be very difficult to find. They're small enough that you can put a quarter across the top of the hole on the nest, and the eggs are about the size of a Tic Tac. When they hatch out, they look like little space aliens, and you wonder, how do any of them survive? But they do, and ruby-throated hummingbird populations are doing really well. And this is just a gratuitous hummingbird photo, but this is one of my favorite photos that I've ever taken of a hummingbird. This is a glittering throated emerald in Peru. and we were on a riverboat cruise in this dugout canoe, and underneath the canopy of a cecropia leaf, this little glittering throated emerald had built her precious little nest. And I will never forget the moment of watching her come back and settle in under her little canopy. Just magical. For some people, they're captivated by the magic of flight. Now, I have to admit that that was never really a thing for me. I prefer my feet on the ground and let the birds do it. But you know, there were these brothers from Ohio who were very captivated by flight. And I found this passage that I really love that to me really encapsulates that fascination. The fascination of flight has haunted the dreams of humans through countless centuries. How many stood and stared at the marvel of the eagle or hawk soaring on unseen currents of air far above the ground. And then, when the sun had set, they saw, beyond the grasp of eagles and hawks, the myriad stars of the night and the unknown reaches of space. The dream of Daedalus, father of Icarus, spread across the generations and continents until finally, from Kill Devil Hill, on a beach near a small village called Kitty Hawk, the dream flared for a few dozen seconds and then became reality. I love this quote by Wilbur Wright that more than anything else, the sensation is one of perfect peace, mingled with an excitement that strains every nerve to the utmost, if you can conceive of such a combination. It almost makes me want to be able to fly. But you can't talk about flight without talking about the birds. And this bird is the champion of migration. This is the bar-tailed godwit. Now, we don't see bar-tailed godwits in Ohio, but we do see some of their cousins, other godwits. But with the bar-tailed godwit, first, this is a really cool looking bird. They're big, they're not like warblers, they're big, robust birds. You'll see them on the edge of mud flats on the edge of a wetland, probing with that long, beautiful bill for worms and macroinvertebrates. So they're just on the surface, they're beautiful looking birds. But what they do in migration is absolutely astonishing. Bar-tailed godwits breed on Arctic coasts and tundra, mainly in the Old World, and winter in coastal areas in temperate and tropical regions of the Old World and of Australia and New Zealand. The migration of the Alaskan population of this bird is the longest known nonstop flight of any bird and the longest journey without pausing to feed by any animal in the world. The bar-tailed godwit makes a 6,800-mile fall migration from Alaska to New Zealand. Let me say that again, from Alaska to New Zealand in one continuous flight with no stopovers to rest or refuel. They fly for approximately 8 days or 192 hours, the equivalent of a human being running at 43.5 miles an hour for more than 7 days. It's worth noting that the bird's journey far exceeds any man-made flying device. The current world record for continual flight held by an unmanned aerial vehicle is 82 hours, half that of the godwits, and that is with the assistance of external energy, external solar energy. These birds will double their body weight before leaving to migrate, building up fat reserves for fuel that will power this epic journey. To compensate for that intense weight gain, I want you to listen to this. To compensate for that intense weight gain, they absorb some of their own internal organs. They metabolize organs that they don't need for the flight to reduce their body weight. And when they get to the end of their journey, they regrow those internal organs. And along the way, this is a question that a lot of kids ask. How do they rest? Along the way, the birds are able to shut down one half of their brain at a time and sleep on the wing while they're migrating. No wonder we love birds. I think birds are a doorway to the natural world. If you're outside looking at birds, you can't help but notice that beautiful butterfly or beetle or even spider or dragonfly or wildflower. They're a wonderful introduction to all the other beautiful things to find in the natural world. They bring us endless joy. They inspire a sense of wonder. They help us stay curious. And I think my favorite thing about birds is that they are a powerful equalizer. In a world where we're so quick to argue about any number of things, even people who are friends, when birders come together, they're united by this common love of birds, and everything else fades away, and you are all birders in that moment, and that's all you are. I've seen people in these pictures who a few days earlier were arguing on things on social media, and out there it's like, quick, come down here. I want to show you this golden wing warbler that I just saw. It's really just the most powerful, moving experience. And I love that birds can be such an amazing equalizer. I think we need birds. In the most practical terms, we need birds because they perform important ecosystem services. They dispense seeds, they keep insect populations in check, and they pollinate a lot of plants. And the birds need us too. The birds need us to keep this from becoming this, or this from becoming this. We need birds because I want the next generation to understand that predictableness of the red-winged blackbirds returning into the marsh. I want them to know the joy of seeing a rufous-crested coquette in Panama, this incredible little hummingbird. I want that bird to exist for future generations. The birds need us to do that. We've got to keep kids, at least on some level, disconnected from devices, away from screens and out in nature, because they are the stewards of these habitats for the future. They will inherit all the problems we're laying out for them. We need to help them love birds and nature. And it's one of the things that I love the most about Black Swamp Bird Observatory is I think we do that really well. I hope that all of you, if you can't register for the biggest week, that's okay. We hope you will, but please promise me that you'll get out and go birding somewhere this spring. I think everyone in this room would agree that we live in a place that has the best metro parks anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. And birds, migratory birds aren't exclusive to McGee Marsh or Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. You get out into your metro parks, if you have some trees in your backyards, you're going to see migratory birds, even warblers in your metro parks and your yard if you have the habitat. So please just get out and enjoy birds and habitat anywhere that you can this spring. And with that, I thank you so much, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Yeah. Did you have a question?
The identification stuff for the warblers that are coming through.
We do. And the question is, do we have any identification things for warblers? We have a lot of those kinds of things available. We have a fold out warbler guide. You can find those on the Bird Observatory's website. That's a great question. Thank you for asking it, because in a couple of weeks, our biggest week visitors guide will be hitting newsstands. 20,000 copies of this will be at restaurants, libraries, metro parks, and there's a whole fold out section on identifying spring warblers. We've had the males featured in there. This is breaking news. You're the first to hear this, but this year the females will be included in that publication. So thank you. Great question. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious, talking about the windmills. Do any studies show how far away from the specific places that the birds like to stop that it would be good so that it doesn't cause them damage, but we can still take advantage of what they can provide?
So the question is, how far away do we need to keep wind turbines, if I'm interpreting this correctly, from places like this?
Spot on.
It's so that we can tap into that resource but protect birds. And that's such an important question. And it's one that's hard to answer, because even this Bird Observatory, a scientific organization, can't get that data. We reached out, there's a huge wind facility, a series of them in the western part of the state. Years ago, we reached out to say, show us your data. How many birds are your facilities killing, and what birds and what numbers?
Right.
And if you're killing a lot of birds there, that far away from the lakeshore, where birds are just actively passing over, not dropping down through the rotor swept zone, then we'll know any place closer to the lake, but they would not give us the data. In fact, they sued us to keep us from getting it. So it's a very difficult thing to make that determination when you can't base it on scientific
Right.
data.
Oh, yeah.
So in lieu of having that information, we would say at least 15 miles away from this lake shore, we should not have at least 15 miles, preferably more. But that's just based on what little we do, we do know.
That would be mainly the fields of them versus the one or two that you see on occasion?
It
or-
depends on what bird you're talking about, because the turbines in Bowling Green killed a bald eagle. And we know it did because people saw the bird fly into it. I think that lent to part of the decision that Bowling Green is taking those turbines down. They've exceeded their lifespan. They really didn't pan out to make enough savings to warrant putting more up. So they're putting a solar array in, which we're really pleased about.
Yeah.
But one turbine on the wrong night with a low cloud ceiling, well, you have 10,000 birds dropping down through the rotor swept zone could be catastrophic. And here where we've got all of our eggs in one basket, would be a terrible place to experiment.
Yeah.
So it's a great question. Yes.
What effects is global warming having on scheduling?
It's a great question. The question is, what effect is global warming having on the timing of migration? And we don't have enough information to tease out that answer yet. Most of these birds coming from Central and South America, the weather has no impact on that. Migration is driven by day length. We talked about how the birds are kind of hardwired to know. They don't have any idea what weather's going on in the central part of the US. What we're really concerned about, though, is the timing of that hatch of insects. If that no longer corresponds with the timing of birds coming through, that in itself could have a major impact. And believe it or not, 30 years of data that we have doesn't seem to be enough to tease out any earlier time of arrival. There are some birds that are coming through earlier, but we are only just now starting to analyze to feel like we might have enough data to tease that out. It's a great question. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was curious about the project to turn the lights off in cities. But then, this may be a problem. You said that when they have the lights on, then the birds are disoriented. When the lights are off, are they bumping them?
No, what happens is as the birds are passing over, those tall lighted buildings kind of disorient their navigation system. You know, they navigate using the stars, and it just causes them to be disoriented and to come down, and they think it's the night sky. Glass buildings are like the death knell for migratory birds. So they think they can fly right through and they collide with the buildings. The same thing happens at homes. If you've had bird feeders, you've heard that terrible sound of the thud of the bird hitting your glass. There are solutions. If you're having trouble at your home, look up a company called Feather Friendly. They're based out of Ontario. Their product has been vetted through every bird conservation organization in the country. It's a series of dots or stripes that you put on the outside of the glass. Anything that breaks up that reflection has to be on the outside of the glass. But this is a product that you can put on the windows that will keep birds, that will prevent them from seeing their reflection. So I hope that answered your question. Great. And you had a question.
I was just going to ask, like Toledo is turning off the lights. Is it feasible to shut down the turbines for a certain amount of weeks until the migration moves through?
Yeah, so the question is it feasible to turn off wind turbines during migration? And this is a complex thing, but in general, one, it's typically not cost effective. It impacts those slim margins between generating enough electricity to pay for the construction of the turbines. The other thing is that we have no studies that tell if there's really a measurable difference between, especially for songbirds. Songbirds are coming through at night. They don't see those blades turning. So does it really make a difference if the blades are turning or not? It's still a gauntlet of massive poles with these big blades sticking out that birds could collide with. There have been studies that show that maybe painting one blade black, but those studies were somewhat debunked, that it was too small a sample size, and there were some problems with that study, even though the media got a hold of that and promoted it as this is the solution. And I don't want to go on too long about this, but the other thing is that people say, well, birds will eventually learn to fly around them, but that's a problem too, because we saw that funneling effect where a lot of the habitat here has been developed. If birds have to navigate far around that course that they followed for millennia, that can push them to the edge, and we can have mortality from that as well.
All right, I had a couple here, if you've got a second.
Okay.
I'm gonna put two together. One is, do you have to register for birding week, or can you go anytime? And then this, that goes with it. How many different kinds of birds tend to show up during the Great Bird Week?
So the question is, do you have to register for the biggest week? If you want to participate in the field trips and a lot of the workshops, yes. If you want to come to the keynotes, yes, you do. But there are a lot of things that are free and open to the public. You'll find all those listed on the website. We really love when people register for the event, but we really just want people to get out and fall in love with birds. So we have a lot of things to offer where you don't have to register. And Ken, can you remember? I mean, 300 species have been documented on the lakeshore, but it pushes 200, I think, 200 species that are seen during the 10-day stretch of biggest week, like maybe 160 to 180.
Actually, yeah, a couple of the recent years, the list during the biggest week has been 220, 230.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of it.
A lot.
Okay, I'll keep going. I had, I'm gonna mangle this somehow. The question was when you were talking about, the feral cats. If what we're doing isn't working, what do you suggest that we do for feral cats?
Well, I'm gonna be brave and tell the truth. The truth is that euthanasia has to be part of the equation because we will not trap, neuter, and release our way out of this problem. That's been going on for years, and you still have cat populations. If you look at social media, shelters are filled with cats and turning people away. People that legitimately need help, who are moving, who can't take their cats, and they find no other recourse but to find a colony somewhere or dump them out alongside the road. Cats should be trapped. If they can be rehabilitated and put safely into homes, they should be, but if they're too sick or too wild, they should be humanely euthanized. And people just recoil at that idea, but that's what we do with our beloved pets. It's a humane way to die rather than all of the appalling ways that these cats can die when they're put back out on the streets, hit by cars. In winter, I'm sure you guys have heard of cats that crawl up into the engine seeking warmth. It's just, I would rather see cats humanely euthanized than put out there to suffer any measure and any type of appalling death.
Okay, I can keep going. I got a couple.
Okay.
How did they monitor brain activity in the migrating godwits to know that
You know, yeah. That's a great question. Ken, are you aware of this? I know that there are studies, if you Google search the peer-reviewed papers on this, I can't quote the scientists, but there is science behind it.
Yeah, the studies have been done in labs, not with actual flying, migrating guys. So, you know, across a broad range of birds, they can have half, one hemisphere asleep and the other hemisphere awake. And it's assumed that these birds that are flying continuously have to be able to do that. There actually have been monitors on brain activity in some birds that fly for a long time, like great frigate, for example.
I wish I could figure out how to do that during spring migration.
paraphrase that for those on Zoom to kind of?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The studies were done in labs. We didn't have people who were flying along in ultralights beside birds with probes on their brains. This was all done in the lab. So if you Google search those studies, you'll find some of those. I can't remember the name of the scientists or the papers, the name of the papers that were published, but I knew that it was based on science. Sorry for the vague answer there.
All right, I got one last one that I think will be a good way to end because you can how can you get maps of the area for places of birds and where to stay?
So much information about birding in Northwest Ohio. The question is, where can you get maps of the birding areas? A lot of the birding sites are listed on the Bird Observatories on the Biggest Week website. So we'll list the site, the birding site, and then there'll be a map that you can download and print. So that's a good source of accurate information about those birding areas. There's also something called the Lake Erie Birding Trail. This was published, it's a big bound book published by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and it's a tremendous source of information. You can find that for sale online.
So just as a follow-up, can you tell everybody again your website and the birding week website? So that everybody-
So I do want to mention that out by the cookies, strategically placed, are some membership brochures. There's a card inside. We would love to have all of you join our team, support our school programs, and there are some great perks for you too. You can send a little card in there, but you can find more about the Bird Observatory at Black Swamp Bird Observatory .org, bsbo.org. And the Biggest Week, we condense it down to bwiab.com, all of the information. But if you Google search Black Swamp Bird Observatory or Biggest Week, it will get you to the website with the source of all of this information. So.
Not good.
Oh, yes,
I
did
just
you?
wanted to say
Yeah.
something. We live in Pike Place and Collin Park is a really good place.
Collin Park is an excellent place. It's one of the places that we frequently stop on our van trips, bringing people from all over the world to Collin Park to enjoy your birds. It's a wonderful, wonderful place for birds. Absolutely.
And I assume most people in here maybe have been to the Bee Marsh. It is our first time. They were the most generous people, I'd say, well, you look at it, it's like, oh, you see this. And it was, what's this black and white? It's a black and white warbler. What's this yellow? It's a yellow warbler. So they were just very patient.
Yeah, it really is. These people are so happy to be here. There are people from all over the world that plan their entire vacation or holiday to come here, and they're so happy to see birds. It's one of the things I love is that there's always a focus on rare birds. People get really excited, but when people travel here from Japan or Australia and come into our window on wildlife at Black Swamp and they see a red-winged blackbird or a male cardinal, you'll hear a gasp and you'll run in and think, they're right. These birds are beautiful. We're so lucky to have those common birds around us all the time. And I love that it's a good reminder of seeing those birds through their perspective. So.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. I want to thank Impact and Employment Solutions for sponsoring the spring lecture series. Our next lecture will be on April 10th at 7 p.m. We're going to have Jennifer Day, who will talk about 50 years of work with the Great Lakes Environmental Research Lab and the Great Lakes Environmental Research Lab, their history through NOAA and everything else with that. Don't forget, if you guys aren't members or you guys online aren't members, you can always join at nmgl.org. If you want to learn more about the second wave, nmgl.org/the second wave. And I think that's what we have for tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Stay safe and well, and we hopefully will see you all in April.